Hey guys! Bored of those vocab lists? Me too. At 1 Degree North Companion, we're turning wordly wise into an adventure to make learning actually interesting. Let's jump in.
Imagine, for a moment, an entire city, frozen in time, not by ice, but sealed under a mountain of ash and fire. Today, we're going on a journey, back 2,000 years, to a place that was literally wiped off the map, its final tragic moments preserved in a way that is just unbelievable. We are going to unearth the story of a lost city. Now, this wasn't some quiet little village. This was Pompeii, a thriving, bustling Roman town. And think about this, home to maybe 20,000 people. It was a real center for business, for culture, a place humming with the energy and ambition of the Roman world. And, it was beautiful. The wealthy of Rome built these elegant homes here, these incredible villas decorated with art that still takes your breath away. The city squares were surrounded by impressive public buildings, gorgeous temples, all of it resting peacefully in the shadow of a mountain they thought was their protector. And then, in a matter of hours, it all just vanished. Buried deep under a thick, heavy blanket of volcanic ash, it became a ghost town, completely lost and forgotten for almost 1,700 years. So how could a city so full of life just disappear? Well, that's the story we're here to uncover. You see, the final, catastrophic end of Pompeii didn't just happen out of the blue. The Earth itself had actually sent out warnings, powerful messages that something terrible was brewing deep underground. But in a time before modern science, these messages were tragically misunderstood. What's so incredible when you look at this is the gap. 17 years. 17 years passed between that first major warning shot and the final, unthinkable disaster. That means a whole generation of kids grew up hearing stories about the big earthquake, never ever imagining what was really coming. That first warning, well, it arrived as a tremor. We're talking about a violent shaking of the ground. In the year 62 CE, Pompeii was rocked by a massive earthquake. This wasn't just a little rumble. It was powerful enough to cause serious damage all over the city. But the people of Pompeii were tough, resilient. They just did what people do. They started the long, painstaking work of rebuilding their city. They had no way of possibly knowing that this tremor was a sign of something far, far worse. They didn't know it at the time, but that earthquake, it was just a prelude. Like the opening act, an introduction to a much bigger, much more terrifying main event. It was the mountain basically clearing its throat. And that's the key takeaway here. The disaster of 79 CE didn't happen in a vacuum. That big earthquake 17 years earlier was the first sign that the immense geological forces deep beneath their feet were starting to wake up from a very long sleep. For hundreds of years, the people of Pompeii had farmed on the rich slopes of Mount Vesuvius. They saw it as a gift, a source of life. Why wouldn't they? It had been quiet for as long as anyone could remember. They had no idea they were living next to a time bomb. It was dormant, inactive. For 800 years, Vesuvius hadn't erupted. Let that sink in. 8 centuries is more than enough time for people to forget, for warnings to fade into myth, and for a deadly volcano to be seen as nothing more than a peaceful mountain. But deep down, way below the surface, the mountain wasn't sleeping. Not at all. It was a giant chamber of incredible heat, just churning with molten rock. Rock that was literally melted, made liquid by the Earth's fiery core. And this right here, this is the perfect way to understand what was happening. During those 800 quiet years, some of that molten rock cooled and hardened right at the top, forming this incredibly thick, heavy plug that sealed the volcano shut. It's just like a cork in a bottle of champagne. And just like that champagne bottle, the pressure underneath was building. Hot gas and fresh magma were pushing up and up and up against that plug. Not for a few months, but for centuries. The power building up inside was truly stupendous, just awesome and terrifying in its scale. And then, on August 24th, 79 CE, that pressure became too much to contain. The plug of hardened lava was expelled with a force that is almost impossible to imagine. The cork popped, and centuries of pent-up fury were unleashed in a single, tremendous explosion. So, what actually happened during those awful hours? Well, by putting together eyewitness accounts with modern science, we can actually reconstruct the anatomy of this catastrophe. And it wasn't just one big bang, it was a series of horrifying events. We are incredibly lucky to have an eyewitness account from a Roman historian named Pliny the Younger. He watched the disaster unfold from a safe distance across the bay, and he described this gigantic cloud of ash as looking like an umbrella pine, a tall trunk soaring into the sky, then spreading out. It was such a perfect description that, to this day, scientists call this exact type of violent eruption a Plinian eruption, in his honor.
Now, the falling rock and ash were bad enough, but the real killers were the pyroclastic flows. These were like superheated avalanches of poisonous gas and burning ash that screamed down the mountain at hundreds of kilometers an hour. You couldn't outrun them. For most people who died, the end was almost instant. It wasn't from being buried, but from suffocation, as that toxic, scorching air filled their lungs.
And this is where the story takes an absolutely haunting turn. You see, as people were buried in that hot ash, it hardened around them, creating a perfect mold. Then, over hundreds of years, their bodies decomposed, leaving behind these empty, hollow spaces in the hardened ash, an exact, detailed imprint of their final moments on Earth. Then, in the 1800s, archaeologists had a truly ingenious idea. They realized they could pour liquid plaster into these hollow voids. And what they got back were these incredibly detailed, heartbreakingly real casts of the people of Pompeii. These aren't statues. They are eerie, three-dimensional echoes of real people captured in the very last second of their lives. So for nearly 1,700 years, Pompeii slept under its blanket of ash. But when it was rediscovered, it opened this unique, incredible window into the past, letting us walk the very same streets as the Romans in a city perfectly sealed off from time. And the work of bringing this city back to light is called excavation. It's a painstaking process, incredibly slow, careful, meticulous work, sifting through history one layer at a time. This work officially started way back in 1763. And believe it or not, that work is still going on today. For more than 2.5 centuries, this excavation has been revealing the secrets of Pompeii. We've found bakeries with loaves of bread still in the ovens. We've found homes with their beautiful paintings still on the walls. It gives us this incredible, candid snapshot of what life was really like. And all this brings us to one last thought. The story of Pompeii is this powerful, powerful reminder of just how fragile our world is. So I'm going to leave you with a question to think about. If you had to build a time capsule, one designed to survive stupendous tremors, what would you put inside? Try to describe your idea using 3 of the words we've talked about in our journey today. Something to ponder. Because the past, as we've seen, always has something to teach the future.
Hope you guys enjoyed that last lesson. If you did, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Ready for more? The next one starts right now.
Have you ever felt like you're being pulled in a million different directions, just trying to make everyone happy? Well, today we're going to dive into a timeless fable that really shows the hidden and sometimes absurd cost of people-pleasing. Just look at this scene. You've got a perfectly healthy donkey, not carrying anything, but instead being carried like a piece of luggage. Now, this isn't where the story begins. It's the completely baffling end. And the real question is, how on earth did they end up here? And that's where this crazy image really hits home, because it's a mirror for a problem we all face. Seriously, think about it. If you tried to follow every single piece of advice, every single opinion, every single criticism that came your way, what would happen? Well, you'd probably end up carrying a donkey. Now, to really get why this journey went so wrong, we need the right words to understand the pressure, the frustration, and the fear that were driving all the decisions. Let's build our toolkit. First up, we have indignant. This is that hot flash of anger you get when you feel like you're being treated unfairly. You know, imagine a startup founder who gets totally contradictory advice from investors. One says pivot to this market, and the next says no, do the complete opposite. That feeling of being jerked around, that's indignation. Then there's cumbersome. And this isn't just about something being physically heavy. It can be the crushing weight of opinions. Think about a marketing team trying to handle a huge social media backlash. The sheer volume of comments and criticism becomes this messy, unmanageable, totally cumbersome task. And what's often fueling all this pressure? The fear of ridicule. Being mocked is a powerful thing. It can stop a brilliant creator from ever releasing their work just because it's a little unusual and they're afraid of what people will say. That fear of ridicule, it's basically the engine driving our whole story. And let's just quickly add a couple more words to our list. We've got the moral, which is the big lesson we're looking for here, and then there's mirth, which is a special kind of laughter. It's not just funny, it's the kind of amusement people feel at someone else's expense. It's got an edge to it. And hey, speaking of words, here's a fun little detour. Take the word resume. As a verb, to resume something means to start again. But as a noun, a resume is a summary of your past. Same word, two totally different meanings. It's a great reminder that context is everything, which is exactly what our characters in the fable are about to forget.
Okay, so let's see how all these words play out in the story itself. It's called A Tale of Two Donkeys, but really, you could call it a perfect case study in how a series of small, seemingly harmless compromises can lead to total disaster.
The whole thing is just a slow-motion train wreck. It starts simply enough. The daughter is riding the donkey, but someone criticizes them, so they comply. They switch. Now the father is riding, but then a new group criticizes that, so they comply again. Both of them get on the donkey. Of course, they get shamed for overburdening the poor animal. With every single comment, they just comply, until they're left with the most illogical solution of all, carrying the donkey. Each step seemed reasonable in isolation, but the final destination was pure chaos.
And here's where it gets really fascinating. The story says the group that criticized them last was filled with compassion for the donkey. Compassion, that's a good thing, right? But stop and think about this for a second. How did that so-called compassion, mixed with the father's desperate need to comply, lead to the absolute worst possible outcome for the donkey?
The answer to that question isn't just in the plot of the story. It's actually hidden inside the very words we've been using. There's a secret logic in the history of our language that can crack this whole thing wide open.
To get it, we have to look at the storyteller, Aesop. He was an enslaved person in ancient Greece, which meant he couldn't just come out and criticize powerful people. So what did he do? He created a kind of code, fables. These simple stories about animals were a brilliant, safe way to point out the foolishness of the powerful. It's an ancient strategy for speaking truth to power without getting in trouble.
And that brings us right back to our key word, compassion. Let's break it down. It comes from the Latin roots com, which means together, and pathos, which means to suffer. So real compassion isn't just feeling sorry for someone from a distance, it literally means to suffer with them.
And by that definition, the onlookers in our story had zero true compassion. What they had was a quick hit of pity, which they immediately turned into judgment. They didn't understand the situation at all, and their shallow, performative compassion just created a bigger, heavier burden for everyone involved.
Let's do the same thing for our word cumbersome. Its root actually means to block a path with an obstacle. And isn't that just perfect? By trying to please every person they met, the father and daughter didn't just make their trip harder, they literally blocked their own path with the giant, cumbersome obstacle of other people's opinions.
So what's the antidote to all this? How do we get through our own lives, which are flooded with opinions from social media, from work, from everywhere, without ending up in the same ridiculous position? Well, the fable gives us a pretty clear answer. Here it is, the fundamental lesson. And it's as true today as it was thousands of years ago. Trying to please everyone is a journey that goes nowhere. You just end up walking in circles, changing your direction every time you hear a new voice, until you finally collapse. The only way out of that loop is to develop your own moral compass. Now, this isn't about being stubborn or ignoring all feedback. It's about having a core set of principles that lets you filter the feedback. It's that internal guide that helps you figure out what's useful advice and what's just empty judgment, so you can navigate all that noise without getting lost. So I'm going to leave you with a final challenge. Think about a time you had to deal with constant criticism. How did you, or how could you, exert your own judgment in that situation? Try to describe your guiding principle using 3 of the words from our lesson today. It's a really powerful way to take this ancient story and make it a practical tool for your own life. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. I'll see you in the next one.